Hello, ladies and gentlemen, this is Oxhorn, and this is the story of University Point. By the year 2285, University Point was a struggling but peaceful settlement. As you explore the ruins of the settlement, you see all sorts of trader booths, cash registers, and private homes. It looked like University Point at one time was a frequent stop, if not a hub, for traveling merchants. One of the families that lived at University Point was Gerald Spencer and his daughter, Jacqueline Spencer. Gerald loved his little girl, Jacqueline. His wife, Josephine, had died 3 years earlier and he had not gotten over it. He's proud of his daughter, whom he says reminds him a lot of his dead wife, Josephine. Like Josephine, Jacqueline likes to tinker with things. She's fiercely intelligent, and she helps the other settlers of University Point with their computer problems. She managed to reconnect all of the terminals in University Point so that the citizens could send messages to each other. She's the go-to girl whenever there's a computer problem. Jacqueline is a curious teenager. Her dad is sentimental. She recalls a story of when they went to visit her mom's grave. He cried for days after that. She's not quite so sentimental. She's more interested in scavenging through the ruins of Sedgwick Hall, a partially sunken structure at the back of the settlement. In her terminal, you find accounts of her sneaking past mirelurks to try and find pre-war technology and data. One day, she stumbles upon some data that she doesn't quite understand. It's partially corrupted. She sees the word energy, and she, in her imagination, describes it as fusion reactor energy improvements. She doesn't really know what it means, but she thinks it might be valuable. She strikes up a deal with a local trader to have a 25-75 split if the trader can find a buyer for the data. She sends the trader off, excited that hopefully someday someone will find value in this data and she'll become rich. The problem is that this message attracted the wrong kind of attention. One day, the mayor of the town, Mayor Bert Strickland, got a visit from an unsavory character. The event shook him so much that he called a town meeting and played the tape before the entire town.
As head of the town council, I call this meeting to order. In attendance this evening, we have Perry Owens, Gerald Spencer, Sylvia Cooper, and myself, Bert Strickland, as acting council head.
Bert, what is all this about? I've got wheat that needs bringing in.
Yesterday, I received a very disturbing visitor. I managed to record part of the conversation. It's probably best if you all hear it. I don't see anything about that in my records. What was it you said you wanted again?
Don't toy with me. We know a girl here found some pre-war data related to energy research, and you're gonna give it to us.
I really have no idea what data you think we have. We're just farmers and fishers. I'd be happy to ask around for you. Please, just lower the gun.
Look, I'm a reasonable man, but the Institute wants that data. You got 2 days to get it for me, and then we do this the hard way. Oh God, Jacqueline.
What has your daughter done, Gerald?
She's been saying that she was close to finding something in those old terminals she fixes up. But I don't think she actually found anything.
Bullshit. Now, I overheard her talking to that trader last week. Something about getting 10 times the price for something if she sold it in Diamond City.
Look, just let me talk to her. See if she actually has this data or not.
Pete, sit down. We all need to remain calm about this. I need you all to keep this to yourselves for now. The last thing we need is to start a panic.
If you've played very far into the game, you recognize the voice of the Institute messenger. That was none other than Kellogg, one of the most dangerous Institute mercenaries around. The town has been officially threatened by the Institute. Mayor Strickland does his duty and informs the citizens, but he urges for calm. He argues that this could very well be a bluff. He doesn't know who this Kellogg guy is, but the other residents of the town don't listen. They panic. Perry Owens is one of the primary instigators. As soon as he finds out about this, he begins gossiping with other residents of the town. He's out for blood. He starts to come up with all of these crazy theories like Jacqueline is really working for the Institute. Another citizen named R. West actually calls Jacqueline a synth. Martha Cole, another resident, actually goes to Gerald and says, "Shame on you. What has your family become?" The residents believe that the youth of Jacqueline has made her foolhardy and has put all of their lives at risk. Even though the Institute didn't ask for it, many of them suggest giving up Jacqueline to the Institute when they come back.
Sylvia, I don't care what Bert says. People have a right to know what kind of danger they're in. Look, the youngsters may think the Institute is just a ghost story, but I know you're old enough to remember the attacks. I know you feel for the girl, but she brought the trouble down on us. She and her father need to answer for it. If we give the Institute what they want, or just give them the girl even, maybe they'll leave us alone.
Pete Owens, another resident, makes this suggestion, and Gerald, Jacqueline's father, actually starts a fist fight with Pete. Jacqueline is all he has left. Josephine, his wife, is long dead. He loves his daughter. He's not going to give her up. But not all of the residents of this little town are so paranoid. One of the older residents, Sylvia Cooper, she likes Jacqueline. Jacqueline is the one who repairs her computer when it goes down. She sends Gerald a message and says, "Please, get out while you still can. It's not your fault. You're young. You and your daughter can live a new life somewhere else." He sends a message to Jacqueline saying, "It's not your fault." Mayor Bert Strickland is in a tough spot. He has to keep the peace. He has all of these residents who are at his throat trying to do something horrible to Jacqueline. But he's not as foolhardy as the others. He fears for Jacqueline's safety, and he tells her, "Please, stay at home. Do not leave your house right now." All of this happened behind Jacqueline's back. Even her father, Gerald, didn't realize the extent that the town had turned against him and his family. And he tells Mayor Strickland how upset he is that they went behind his back about this. Jacqueline is just confused. She's getting all of these messages on her terminal saying, "You're a horrible girl, you're a synth, you should leave, I'm not going to die for you, what have you done?" She just deletes them. She doesn't realize what's going on. When she finally hears the full tale from her father, she's horrified. She didn't mean to get the Institute involved in this. The Institute was just the bogeyman. She didn't know that it was a real thing, that it still existed, and she certainly didn't try to get their attention. She just wanted to make a little bit of money on the side. Is that so wrong? But she's got a plan. She wants to fix this. If only she can find the rest of the data, then maybe she can just give it to the Institute and they'll go away.
Okay. First, I want to say I'm sorry, Dad. I knew I was onto something big, and thought I'd see what a trader would pay if I found it. I had no idea that the Institute would be after any of this, and now the whole town is in trouble. I know you told me not to worry, but I just know that the town is going to vote to throw us out, or worse. I wasn't lying when I said I didn't have the data, despite what Mr. Owens and his cronies think. That's why I have to go back in. I know the key is in there. I just need to put the pieces together. It's something with that professor. If I can find it, maybe I can give the Institute what they want, and they'll just leave us alone.
This story does not have a happy ending. When you arrive at University Point, you find it swarming with synths. That can only mean one thing. True to his word, Kellogg came back 2 days later, and he wasn't in a bargaining mood. He and his synths stormed University Point and killed everyone. You find their skeletons littering the ground, outside and inside Sedgwick Hall. Jacqueline thought she was so close to finding the data. You find a note from Jacqueline where she apologizes. "I'm so sorry, I didn't mean for any of this to happen." And in the note she says, "I think I found the rest of the data." But sadly, she never got to give it to the Institute or explain to them her story. You find what appears to be her skeleton lying on the ground next to a terminal. The terminal belongs to Professor Stewart Campbell. He was a professor into energy research before the war. We're led to believe that the rest of the data that Jacqueline found was on this terminal. Her note is by the terminal, her body is by the terminal. What is in this terminal? Well, we find a subplot to this whole drama that happened years before these settlers ever made their home at University Point. The key actors are Professor Stewart Campbell, who researches energy research, and Dean Alan Patterson, who is in control of the university. When you read the entries in both Dean and Campbell's terminals, you find a bit of a rivalry going on. Dean Patterson hired Stewart Campbell and gave him almost immediate tenure because Stewart Campbell had a lot of private sector contacts, and it was through his relationship with Campbell that Dean got a large grant for the university. So cool, he got what he wanted. You'd think he'd leave it at that, right? But no. Now the dean is starting to second-guess his decisions. A work crew arrives at the University Point Credit Union building and starts to undertake some sort of underground construction. Of course, this was done without the dean's approval, so he's a little upset. He reaches out to Stewart Campbell and says, "What's going on? I didn't approve any construction over at the credit union. What's going on here?" At the same time, the dean is getting messages from the HR department and other departments within the college. And they're saying that they're noticing some odd behavior from Campbell. They notice that he's going into the credit union building on weekends and late at night with a young female graduate student named Leslie Matthews. Dean clearly gets the idea that some sort of unsuitable behavior is going on in Professor Campbell's department. So he has somebody tail Dean Campbell, a man named Henry Mitchell. He follows Leslie and Campbell around to watch their movements. At the same time, the dean is trying to get to the bottom of what's going on with this construction. He reaches out to Campbell, but Campbell refers him to a Colonel Rosemont of the United States military. The dean can't get a hold of Colonel Rosemont. Rosemont keeps giving him the runaround. It finally becomes clear to him that Professor Stewart Campbell on the side is performing research for the United States military. The construction going on beneath the credit union building is a private lab for Professor Campbell and his graduate students to continue to perform research for the military. The dean reaches out to Professor Campbell and says, "Look, I never agreed to this. I am the dean of this university. You are just a professor. This needs to stop." Professor Campbell says, "Look, I know why you hired me. You hired me because you wanted a really rich grant. Well, you got your grant. Enjoy your money. I've got tenure, and I've got some research to do." He reminds the dean that because this research is going on at the university, that once it's declassified, the university is going to be making a lot of money off of it. He's a little catty, though. He remembers that the dean is about to go on vacation to Maui, and he says, "Look, I'll continue to do my job. I'm going to do my research on this side. If you have a problem with it, take it up with the United States military, but you signed the contract, and you know how the military tends to react when you want to renegotiate a contract. So just mind your business and enjoy Maui." We also learn from this terminal that the strange behavior Professor Campbell has with his female graduate student Leslie Matthews can easily be explained. He has another graduate student named Curtis Marsh. He's got a liking for young Curtis, a bright young man with a lot of potential. Apparently Curtis has a crush on Leslie Matthews. They've gone on a few dates, and Professor Campbell actually likes to see a budding romance going on between his two graduate students. They all work together for the United States military in their private workplace underneath the credit union, and that is why Professor Campbell is seen late at night and on the weekends going to the credit union with Leslie Matthews. He just wants to see two young lovers find happiness. So, this is the data that Jacqueline found. This was the place where she thinks she found the last piece of the puzzle, in the bottom of the credit union. If you go in the front of the credit union, you find that there is a back end to the place, but you don't have access to it. You actually have to go back outside and around the building to a locked door. Once you unlock the door, you gain access to the back end of the credit union, but there's a huge vault door in your way. You have to unlock another terminal to access the vault. Inside the vault, you find a bunch of ruined safes. Some pretty good loot, some pre-war money, some ammunition. But there's one safe with a master lock on it. If you manage to unlock this safe, you find a red button. What happens if you push it? Behind the door, we find the sunken laboratory that Professor Campbell and Dean Allen talk about in their terminals. This was the construction that was going on, the construction of this laboratory. Inside, we find 2 sleeping bags on the ground side by side, and on the table, we find a unique weapon, the prototype UP-77 Limitless Potential. This weapon has the never-ending legendary effect, which means it never needs to be reloaded. A pretty cool weapon. The last bit of irony to this tale is that the Institute had no reason to be here. They thought that they could find efficiencies for their fusion reactor. If you followed the main storyline, you know that getting their fusion reactor running was a primary goal for the Institute. That's why they sent Kellogg and the Synths here to University Point. But Professor Campbell wasn't working on a fusion reactor, and neither was the military. That word, reactor, came from Jacqueline. She didn't understand the data that she was seeing. She saw energy research, and she's thinking energy, fusion energy, fusion reactor, and her creativity went away with her at what this data could possibly be, and she misrepresented what it was. Had she known that it was just a gun, maybe she, her father, and the townsfolk would be alive today. The Institute certainly never found what they were looking for. There are still synths there when you arrive, presumably still looking for this fusion reactor efficiency data that doesn't exist. Next to the weapon is a terminal, and in the terminal we find the rest of the story from the perspective of Leslie Matthews. She and Curtis have been working hard in this laboratory, continuing to do energy research at the bequest of the United States military. They were in their lab when the bombs fell. The military has been working closely with the research going on in this bunker, and Leslie and Curtis reach out to the military to ask what's going on, but the military says just stay in the bunker until they get the all clear. Professor Campbell was supposed to come back, but he never showed up. You find a skeleton in the room just above the laboratory. Perhaps this is Professor Campbell's corpse. Maybe he almost made it, but he never came back, and all Leslie and Curtis have right now are each other. Weeks go by. They survive because Professor Campbell had the lab stocked with food and water, but the military has stopped talking to them. They still hear explosions outside the lab, but not quite as many as before. The 2 graduate students decide to continue to work on the prototype weapon for the military, hoping that it'll somehow aid the war effort, but at least it keeps their minds busy. Leslie worries about her friends and, more importantly, her family. But even in such dark and trying times, sometimes something beautiful can blossom. As Curtis and Leslie eat their last bits of food and drink the last of their water, together they decide that it's time to leave the underground lab. Before they leave, Curtis asks Leslie to marry him. You know what? She says yes. Together the 2 join hands and walk out into the wasteland where we never hear from them again. We don't know what happened to Curtis and Leslie. Did they ever have a chance to get married? Did they ever start a family? I'd like to think that after so much sadness here at University Point, so many crushed hopes, so much betrayal, and so much death, that these 2 at least made it out alive. If you like stories like these, ladies and gentlemen, please subscribe for more Fallout 4 lore. I make a new video every day, and my videos include lore, modding, tutorials, guides, and all sorts of stuff. If you like what I do and you want to support me in a more personal way, consider becoming one of my patrons on Patreon. Patreon supporters get access to my private Discord server and a bunch of other Oxhorn perks. But more than anything, ladies and gentlemen, I'm just so glad you're here watching this video. Your views mean so much to me and keep this channel alive. Thanks for watching, everybody.